Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take your research, your articles, your observations, and we really distill them down into the knowledge you need to get up to speed fast. Today, we're diving into something I think, well, pretty much everyone grapples with, this idea of disconnecting. How much is too much tech? And our source material for this deep dive is a really interesting personal account. It's structured around this experiment called simply 7 Days Without Technology. You see these articles all the time, right? But we want to look a bit deeper beyond just the headline and think about what the structure itself tells us.
Exactly. Our mission here isn't just about guessing what happened in the story. We're looking at the foundations of this kind of digital detox experiment. Why this specific setup? What assumptions are baked into choosing this framework? Because it really shapes what the experiment can actually find or what it claims to find. We're trying to spot those aha moments hidden just in the way the challenge is designed.
And it's designed to grab you right from the start. The full subtitle, it makes this really direct promise. I tried living without technology for 7 days. Here's what happened. That's not just a title. It's a narrative hook. It promises a story, a journey, maybe some kind of big revelation at the end.
And that's why it's so relevant for you, the learner. This kind of source, even just the title, it acts like a little laboratory for understanding our dependence on technology. By looking at the framework, the time, the rules, what kind of outcome it implies, we can start to see the universal challenges, the friction points that pop up whenever someone tries to, radically disconnect. It gives you a way to think about your own relationship with technology, your own structure of dependency.
Okay, so let's dig into this. The most obvious starting point is the time frame. 7 days? Why 7 days? Why a full week? It feels specific, doesn't it? Not just a weekend, not a month. What's the significance of choosing 1 week for this kind of intense personal experiment?
Well, what's fascinating here is I think the psychology behind it. Habit formation, habit breaking.
Yeah.
A weekend detox. It's relatively easy.
Yeah.
You just put things off. You'll deal with the emails, the messages, whatever. On Monday, it's postponement. 7 days, though. That's different.
Absolutely. 7 days feels like maybe the minimum time you need to actually disrupt established patterns, that muscle memory of reaching for your phone, checking notifications. The first day or two might be novelty, maybe even a bit exciting. But by day 3, 4, 5, that's when you really start confronting the deep-seated habits.
Right. And connecting this to the bigger picture, 7 days forces you to deal with, essential life functions. You can probably manage a 24-hour break without seriously impacting your job or family commitments. But a whole week, now you're talking about potentially restructuring how you communicate for work, how you manage logistics at home, how you handle things that, frankly, might rely heavily on digital tools. Think banking, appointments, maybe even remote work setups.
Yeah, that raises a key question straight away, doesn't it? What does the source imply about how intense this needs to be to get a story worth telling? If the author just needed, say, 48 hours to have some kind of life-changing insight, maybe the story wouldn't feel as significant. Choosing 7 days suggests that anything shorter might not cut deep enough to reveal how truly embedded technology is in our lives.
It implies that, for many people today, tech isn't just like an add-on. It's woven into the very fabric of how we function, the logistical infrastructure.
Yeah.
And you have to pull pretty hard for a full 7 days to even start to see the shape of that dependence, maybe even expose the vulnerability underneath.
Okay, let's move on to maybe the trickiest part of the title, without technology. This feels broad, maybe even ambiguous. Given that big promise, here's what happened, we really need to think about what technology they decided to exclude. How wide did they cast that net? Because that definition totally changes the experiment.
Exactly. This is where we can sort of categorize the challenge. You can imagine maybe 3 different levels of exclusion here. And the author's choice radically shapes the kind of story they can tell.
Okay, let's break that down. Level 1, what would that look like?
Level 1, I'd say, is probably the easiest. Maybe call it the app detox. This is mostly about screen-based consumer tech. So the person gives up social media, maybe streaming video, online games, but they probably keep their computer for work, maybe their phone, just for basic calls or texts.
Right. So if they stick to level 1, what kind of story do you get?
Well, the story then is likely focused on things like emotional regulation, distraction, maybe attention span. The insights would be about, feeling less anxious without doom scrolling, maybe rediscovering hobbies like reading, having better focus. It's still interesting, but it's a manageable adjustment for most.
Okay, but a lot of these I tried it articles seem to aim higher. So level 2.
Level 2 is definitely harder. Let's call it the screen detox. Here, you're ditching pretty much all screens, smartphones, tablets, laptops, maybe TVs. Perhaps you allow a very specific exception, like a monitor, just for absolutely essential work tasks. But those rules have to be super clear from the start.
And what happens at level 2? What changes?
Level 2 is where the real logistical problems start showing up. It's not just about missing a tweet anymore. Now, you might miss an important appointment because the reminder was digital. Or you can't easily check the bus schedule in real time. You struggle to navigate somewhere new. The story shifts from just internal feelings to actual friction with the outside world. The pain points become about information access, planning, spontaneity.
Okay, and then there's potentially a level 3, the most extreme version.
Yeah, level 3. We could call this the infrastructure detox. This is where without technology gets really hardcore. It could mean ditching not just digital screens, but maybe older tech too. Landlines, maybe even wristwatches if they're digital. Cars if they rely on computers for ignition or navigation. Maybe even electricity if you take it to the absolute philosophical limit.
Wow, okay. That sounds less like a wellness experiment and more like...
Exactly, more like a survival challenge. If someone attempts level 3, the story isn't just about psychology anymore. It's about basic functioning in modern society. The friction points aren't just, I couldn't check Google Maps. They're, how do I pay for groceries without a chip card? How do I even know what time it is reliably?
So the scope of what they cut out, level 1, 2, or 3, directly determines how much disruption they face. And that disruption is what fuels the here's what happened promise. If the story ends up being really dramatic, they probably aimed for level 2 or even touched on level 3 challenges. If it's more about focus and feeling calmer, they were likely closer to level 1.
Right. And that ambiguity in the title, Without Technology, is actually part of its power. When we first read it, our minds often jump to the most extreme version, maybe level 3. Because subconsciously, I think we fear that the invisible infrastructure supporting our lives is fragile, that it could disappear. The title plays on that slight anxiety.
Okay, so let's pivot slightly to that promise itself. I tried living without technology for 7 days. Here's what happened. What kind of expectation does that set up for the audience, for you reading it?
That phrasing, it absolutely functions like a contract. The reader expects something significant, a transformation. They're not clicking to read about someone feeling slightly less bored. They expect concrete outcomes, maybe major hurdles, unexpected emotional shifts, and ultimately some kind of lasting lesson or change in behavior. The story basically needs to justify the effort of those 7 days.
Yeah, it implies a very clear cause and effect, doesn't it? Action. This intense 7-day detox result. The what happened part. The expectation is almost for a mini narrative arc. A struggle, perhaps hitting a low point where the dependence feels overwhelming, and then some kind of resolution or insight. Maybe finding peace, or maybe just realizing how impossible it is.
Precisely. And here's where it gets really interesting for you, the listener. Think about how universally relatable this challenge feels, even before you know the details. Everyone listening can probably, right now, run a quick mental simulation. What would my week look like without technology? What would break first?
Oh, absolutely. You immediately think of those practical friction points. Navigation is a big one for me. How do I get somewhere unfamiliar without a map app? Finding a physical map these days, stopping to ask for directions. It feels almost archaic, incredibly difficult.
Or think about the psychological side, that anxiety of just not knowing. The moment you have a random question pop into your head, who is in that movie, what's the capital of Peru? Is this headache serious? Normally you just pull out your phone. Without it, you have to just sit with the uncertainty. That lack of instant information, that scarcity, can feel surprisingly uncomfortable.
So the power of this source, even just from its title, is that it forces you to do that mental dry run. It makes you confront your own potential dependencies before you even read the first word.
Exactly. It primes you. You're already anticipating the struggles, which makes you more receptive to the insights the author eventually shares.
We anticipate, I think, that the author discovered something fundamental about shifting from efficiency, maybe, to slowness.
Or maybe they reconnected with the physical world in some way. Or perhaps the big takeaway was simply that modern life, as it's currently structured, is fundamentally incompatible with that kind of deep level 3 disconnection. The title demands a significant revelation, and usually that revelation circles back to how much we rely on the underlying systems, the infrastructure, not just the shiny screens themselves.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. We've looked at the core pieces of this source, or at least the framework suggested by its title. We have this dedicated week-long experiment. It's designed to break habits, challenge routines, and it's all packaged in this very strong personal story format. Here's what happened.
So what does analyzing this structure tell us overall, and what's the key takeaway for you?
I think it shows that the real measure of our modern dependency isn't just about screen time metrics. It's more about our reliance on the logistical systems, that technology enables systems that prevent basic social or professional failures. Those level 3 friction points we talked about, missing critical communication, failing to navigate, being unable to transact, those are the really telling data points.
Yeah, it really shifts the focus.
And the very fact that someone needs to frame this as an experiment, as trying to live without modern devices for just 7 days, well, that highlights how deeply integrated these digital systems have become. It shows that living without them is no longer the default state. It's an active effort, a temporary resistance against the norm. That's a really powerful point. So, building on that core idea from the source, here's a final thought to leave you with. If cutting out technology for just 7 days is dramatic enough to warrant an article promising here's what happened, what does that suggest about the hidden impacts, maybe the hidden costs, of our normal, everyday, tech-saturated lives? What kind of major struggle, what kind of revelation about how hard simple things have become without tech is now required just to make that week-long effort seem worthwhile and reportable? That's something to mull over.